This last Sunday, Michjael Jones and Styx Hexenhammer had a debate moderated by Ethan Ralph on the topic of whether or not dirty videos should be banned. For the most part, it was a disappointingly predictable debate. I have a hard time imagining many people from either side would have been convinced by any of the arguments made. I don't have much to say about Jones, but Styx exhibited some extremely common liberal cliches, and I really feel like they need to be responded to. The main arguments that Styx made during the debate were dismissing Jones for being moralizing or Christian, accusing Christians of being hypocrites, telling parents to monitor their children and not expect the state to help, and saying that prohibition doesn't make problems disappear. Many of these points are just missing the whole point of the debate entirely, particularly accusing Christians of hypocrisy. Everyone knows Christians, like everyone else, struggle with sexual immorality. This isn't a revelation. This is even a theme that runs through the Bible itself. God's people struggling with sin. No one's saying Christians are more moral, therefore ban dirty videos. That doesn't even make sense. It's a total non sequitur. The point isn't who's more moral. The point is whether or not this is good for society. Styx made many of the same assertions on prohibition that I already covered in the Louis Levi video.
Let me put it this way. Here's my problem with attempting to crack down on porn. It's pragmatic. The idea that banning something makes it disappear is a time-tested way to fail. You don't make a more moral society.
This clip really is perfect. Styx says banning something doesn't make it disappear. This is, of course, obviously true. Vices will always exist. But disappear? Is that really the standard that anyone is going by? Does Styx seriously think that his opponents believe that banning something will simply make the vice vanish? No, that obviously isn't what anyone is arguing for. The reason why we want to ban certain things is because we want to raise the barrier to accessing it. Banning something and effectively enforcing that ban can make it harder to access that thing, which means a certain percentage of people will not be able to abuse the vice in question. As I've already shown before, alcohol prohibition didn't eliminate alcohol use, obviously. That wasn't the goal. But it did reduce consumption rates by between 30 and 40%. Styx is just setting up a ridiculous straw man by saying that vices don't disappear from being banned. It's very similar to one of the regular leftist arguments against the Mexico border wall, that they say people will still manage to find ways around it. Of course, that's true. But the point is to make it more difficult, not to totally eliminate it. As the saying goes, you shouldn't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. This is how virtually all bans function. They raise the barrier to accessing whatever is trying to be banned. Very few things can actually be stamped out completely, but if a ban is enforced effectively, then it can make it harder to access the banned product. This is what I want to achieve by banning prawn, raising the barrier to access. Just as it's currently hard to find an assassin online, or hard drugs, or many of the dozens of other things that it's illegal to do via the internet. No, it won't eliminate it totally. It won't make it impossible to access, but it's not beyond us to just make it a bit harder to find, thus reducing the number of people, particularly children, that view it. Styx repeatedly said during the debate that parents simply need to man up and do effective parenting to prevent their children from seeing damaging materials. This is one of the most common arguments I hear on this topic. Lamau, just be a good parent. This is very wrong on multiple levels. Even if an individual parent does everything in their power to prevent their children from viewing this stuff, they'll still have access to it with friends and other places that they can simply not monitor. Not to mention the fact that even though blocking websites specifically dedicated to dirty videos might be easy, but most parents probably aren't even aware of all the normal websites that are filled with this type of content, from Reddit to, until recently, Tumblr to Discord servers. But really, that's all besides the point. Even if an individual parent can and does do everything in their power to prevent their children viewing this sort of content, this is still ignoring the bigger problem. We know that currently the average age for first exposure for boys is between 11 and 13. And that's just the average, meaning half of boys see it at even younger ages. Children at this age cannot consent, period. That means, by definition, this is mass sexual abuse against children, particularly boys. I'll repeat that to be clear. The majority of boys currently are being sexually abused. We can call parents who don't do everything in their power to prevent this bad parents, if that's what Styx would like. But we know that it's a fact that the majority of boys right now have these bad parents. And I don't think that we should just sacrifice the innocence of these boys and say, Lamau, their parents should just be better. I care that this is happening right now, and I want to stop this. None of this information is new, yet telling people, Lamau, be good parents, hasn't seemed to do much, which is why we need effective government action to stop it. This brings us to a really core error in modern liberalism that Styx exhibits perfectly during this debate. This is, what is the purpose of government in the first place?
And what I say is libertarian, is that the state exists to prevent victimization.
This is just wrong. The state exists, first and foremost, for collective action. The state exists to act collectively when individual action is not effective. This is why we have a state. This is why everywhere has a state. This is how the state has always functioned. Everything that the state does is by definition collective action. Now, I'm sure Styx would agree that the state is collective action by definition, but the prevention of victimization is how he thinks that this action should be used. But that's just libertarian ideology. There has never really been a time that has been governed by libertarianism. Not during the American founding, not during the 90s, not ever. The state has always used the authority of collective action to quash perceived evils. These actions have sometimes been effective, and they have sometimes not been effective. But this is the very definition of what the state has always done. But there's an even more core problem, a problem with liberalism, that Styx exhibits during the debate. He repeatedly asked Jones to prove to him that dirty videos can be addictive. He said, well, it's not in the DSM-5, and there's contradictory studies on the matter, so he just doesn't know if it can be addictive. Styx, he's just too big-brained to know whether or not it's possible for these sorts of materials to be addictive. The science is out, so who could possibly know whether or not it's addictive? Who knows? It's just impossible to say. We just can't come to a conclusion on this. Of course, for pretty much the entirety of human civilization, it has been well understood the destructive powers that sexual immorality can have. The Bible itself is littered with such stories, from David and Bathsheba to Samson. It's quite remarkable, in fact, that many of the greatest figures in the Bible consistently have sexual immorality as their falling point. Christian Europe itself, of course, reproduced many similar stories, such as Don Giovanni. But, of course, everyone knows that, since the Abrahamic religions are famously repressive of sexuality. But, despite being viewed as times of licentiousness, ancient Roman Greece was not unaware of the destructive power that unchecked sexuality could have. The Iliad itself is about how the lustful abduction of a pretty woman led to war and the destruction of the city of Troy. The launching of 1,000 ships, the deaths of countless fathers and sons, all the result of one man's lust for one woman. But, of course, aren't all those just superstitions? What's the collective wisdom of our ancestors even worth? It certainly doesn't have a dollar value, and a bunch of stories doesn't mean anything to the scientific method. So, okay, that's all really out there. What's the problem? What's this core problem with liberalism that I'm talking about? The issue is this belief that we need to test it. We need to see a study. We just can't know if dirty videos could be addictive if we don't have a meta-analysis. Everyone knows the power that sexuality can hold over us. Everyone knows how our most carnal desires can control us. Everyone knows what the Apostle Paul meant when he said, "For what I am doing, I do not understand. For what I will to do, that I do not practice. But what I hate, that I do." Just as flooding a country with absurdly large amounts of fat and sugar can cause an obesity epidemic, flooding the minds of a country with unlimited dirty videos, to an extent that could be barely understood by our ancestors, can cause epidemic problems with sexuality. We don't need a study to tell us that sex can control us. Civilization has always understood this. Styx's view that the collective wisdom of our ancestors doesn't matter, and we just need some scientific study to tell us what sexuality does. That's the innovation. The burden of proof is with him wanting to blow up this fence. The burden of proof isn't on us, who understand what has always been understood about human nature. Thank you everyone very much for watching. I mean this very sincerely. Even though the amount of growth I've had thus far isn't massive, it still is very encouraging to see the amount of support I've gotten thus far. Please like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, and most importantly, please share this with anyone who you think might find it interesting. Also, if there's anyone watching who has a YouTube channel of their own and is interested in doing any sort of live stream or collaboration, please let me know.